Having worked with businesses across all levels of growth, I've watched organizations transition through some of the toughest hardships and circumstances to truly revolutionize the way that they serve their customers. Hi, I'm Morgan Petty, Executive Media Advisor, VP of Marketing, and Event Strategist for B2B tech brands. I also work with Networld Media Group, a global media firm covering retail, restaurants, customer experience technology, banking, fintech, and other key industries. I'm joined by the amazing Dr. Sarah Glova. Sarah is the CEO and founder of award-winning digital media firm Reify Media. At age 26, Sarah founded this award-winning organization. And over the past 10 years, she's scaled the company to create e-learning materials for universities, corporations, and even nonprofits. Sarah is an expert in technical communications and even earned her PhD in instructional technology. Sarah is a published author, seasoned board member, and international public speaker. Dr. Glova speaks internationally on topics like women in business, entrepreneurship, diversity and inclusion, resilience in business and education, and technologies like IoT and the smart city revolution. As if this resume isn't already impressive enough, Sarah also served as the youngest president of Greater Raleigh's Association for Women in Business. Sarah gains inspiration from her family and lives in Raleigh with her husband and 2 sons. Sarah, it's so amazing to see you. Really looking forward to today's talk.
It's so great to see you. Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited about this chance to tell my story. So thank you so much for making that happen. And I really appreciate that introduction. And it's almost awkward to then go from that to say, you know what, I'm going to talk to you about failure today. But I'm going to talk to you about one of the biggest failures that I had in my business and the reasons that I am so thankful for the failure, for what happened, and for all the lessons that I learned from it. I'm going to tell you about a time just a few years ago when I had to lay off all of my employees. And I have to tell you, it was one of the hardest times in my life. It was an incredible challenge. I felt like the villain in a Disney movie. I don't know how else to describe it. I felt like a fraud. I felt like a traitor. It was an incredibly difficult time to go through, and it really surprised me how long it took to get over it. I was really in a shame spiral for a long time. Now, I'm happy to tell you that today, looking back at that time, I'm confident that it's the reason that I've been able to have continued success as a business owner, as a leader, as an entrepreneur. It's absolutely one of the smartest things that I ever did. And so it's really funny to think that when I was going through it, and even for so long afterward, I was in that shame spiral when it ended up benefiting me and, frankly, the people that I worked with so much. Those were excruciating lessons to learn. And so if I can gift you the biggest lessons from that experience without you having to go through the pain of what I went through, maybe that can help you skip to the lessons learned part and not have to go through that challenge. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to be really honest with you about what that was like as a business owner, having to lay off all your employees. And I'm going to be really frank with you about what I learned from it. And hopefully that can mean you take those lessons with you as well. So let's jump back to the beginning a little bit and I'll tell you some background. I started freelancing in 2009, and that's really what started my business. The same things that I started doing as a freelancer, that's what my company does now. But when I was freelancing in 2009, it was less about starting a business and much more about like buying groceries. I was freelancing because I was in graduate school and I needed some extra cash. And to be honest, I just fell in love with it. I loved the opportunity to work with clients on these different projects and to start these initiatives and help them to create the digital media that they needed for their business or for their classes. And so in 2012, I decided to make it official. I launched Reify Media, and it really took off. Morgan shared that wonderful introduction and hit some of the highlights. And that does always make it sound like it was a clear upward trajectory. Now, I can tell you behind the scenes, yes, in a few years, we grew to six-figure revenue. Yes, in a few years, I took what started as a freelancing gig and was working with clients all over the country. And yes, we were able to hire quickly and scale quickly. And soon I had a full-blown operation with employees and teams working on these high-profile contracts and projects. It was amazing. And it looked that way from the outside. It was a little bit more challenging on the inside. So because we were taking on these large projects, cash flow was always a problem. We had really strong business. We had good traction. We had amazing clients coming in. Some really well-known universities and corporations were wanting to work with us. And I was able to hire employees to do these projects so that we could scale. Well, at the same time, the cash flow issue became a problem. As I was trying to continue to pay these employees that I was working with, I found it really difficult to keep enough cash in the business. And so I started making some sacrifices. And one of the key sacrifices I made was that I stopped paying myself. So to keep money in the business so that we could fund payroll and keep working on projects, I stopped giving myself a regular paycheck. And what I promised myself, and frankly, my husband, was that I would make up for that. I would eventually take distributions and return to receiving a regular salary. But in my mind, that was just the sacrifice that I needed to make at that time. We had so many amazing projects on the horizon. It was like I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And this felt like a temporary sacrifice that I needed to make for my business and for my employees so that we could reach that next level. And so I would tell myself things like, well, after this next project ends, or after we get on the other side of this invoice, once that invoice pays, then. Well, that continued. And eventually I hadn't paid myself for a year. And then it continued and I hadn't paid myself for 2 years. Looking back, it's just incredible to admit that to you, but it just happened gradually and then suddenly. I always had in my mind that, in the next few weeks and then in the next few months that things would turn around and I would make that money back. And it just wasn't happening. We were trying all kinds of things. We tried moving some of our clients to retainer clients so that we would have reoccurring monthly revenue. We tried restructuring some of our proposals and I asked for more money up front as deposit. It's not like we weren't trying to fix things, but it just spiraled out of control. And by the end of those 2 years, I was so tired of listening to the voice in my head that was like, just keep hustling, just keep your nose to the grindstone, just, right around this corner. Sometimes I would tell myself things like, yeah, it's hard now, but one day you'll write a book about how you built this company. And these will be chapters where you show everyone that you kept the faith and just kept working really hard. After 2 years, I couldn't take it anymore. I finally broke. And the action that really helped is I called up one of my business mentors and I just spilled the beans. I shared everything. I was really transparent about where I was and how I felt like a fraud because on the outside, things looked really good. My employees were receiving their regular paychecks. I wasn't. I was working 60-hour weeks and leaving before my kid woke up in the morning, sometimes wasn't there to put him to bed at night. And I really didn't have much to show for it. And luckily, in that moment, my business mentor was not about judging. It was just a brainstorming. What can we do about this? So we talked through some options. And finally, I decided I was going to have to lay off my employees. It wasn't something that I decided on lightly. I was so terrified about that. And when I decided to go through with it, I can tell you every conversation was excruciating. Just the panic of having to get to that point, the disappointment, the guilt and shame, and then wrapped up in all that, the guilt of feeling guilty because here I am laying off employees. They're the ones that should be feeling so upset and how selfish of me to feel that guilt myself. It was just a spiral. And it took me a long time to come out of it. Now, fast forward a couple months, and I can tell you that right away, I began to see the benefits. We were able to refocus some revenue. As soon as I realized I was going to lay off employees, I was able to change some of the revenue structures that were going on in the business and funnel some of that to my employees. I was able to give everyone over 6 weeks notice, a healthy monthly stipend to give to them as soon as I announced the layoffs. I was even able to allow my employees to keep their equipment, to keep their laptops, and I bonused them the cost that they would get taxed on for that equipment because that would be considered income. I mean, I did everything I could. And just a few months later, I realized that if I hadn't made that decision at that time, I might have gotten in debt. I might have dug myself into a hustle hole. And I wouldn't have been able to provide those benefits to those employees that I cared about so much, some of whom were with me right when I started the company. And so right away, I saw some benefits. Fast forward to now, it was absolutely the right decision. We are now able to create these specific contractor teams to work on projects. And so when we get a new project, we find these specialists and we're able to pay them a higher hourly rate than I would have paid employees. They're able to work with us and also other clients. And our clients are happy because we have these really specialized teams getting this work done for them. I mean, it has just worked out on every item. Everything is better because of this decision. So then looking back, what I promised I would kind of reveal to you today, looking back, what is it that made me feel like such a villain at the time? And what is it that made me feel that shame for so long? And what can I learn from that? And what can I share with you so that you don't have to go through the pain of that experience to benefit from the lesson that I learned? And so the lesson I want to share with you today that was really honored by that experience is guard your measuring stick. And so I'm going to explain that a little bit. When I say guard your measuring stick, I mean guard the items on your measuring stick that you use to measure success. So really think to yourself, how do you measure success? What does success look like to you? What are the items or the milestones that you imagine that you'll hit as you go on that journey to being successful? And the reason I share that in this conversation is because I made that mistake. I wasn't doing that. I didn't intentionally set the items on my measuring stick for what success looked like. And so then what happens? Society does it for you. I mean, we are going to have a picture in our minds of what success looks like. And either we're going to create it or it's going to be created for us by the things that we observe and see. And when I was out doing all these networking events and trying to run this company, that picture of success was created for me. I met other women business owners who were doing amazing things. I heard their stories. I talked to folks who had worked with business owners and who had opinions about what to do. And at these networking events, I would hear the same question again and again as I was growing my company. People would say, oh, well, how big is your company? How many employees do you have? And pretty quickly, I learned number of employees equates to a real business. That's what my mind absorbed. That's the idea I had in my head. And it's kind of funny, like a real business as opposed to what, a fake business? I don't know. I mean, when I look back at it now, it seems so ridiculous. But at the time, it was ingrained. It was an unconscious idea of a successful business owner is somebody who grows a team and who can talk about the number of employees that they have. And talk about it, I did. I would name drop that in any conversation I could, because I had realized that people would take you more seriously if you were able to say things like, well, we've grown to 9 employees, part and full-time this year, and we have a suite of contractors who back up our projects. I mean, it made me feel taller in this environment where so often you can feel small. And so I would name drop that in conversations. I internalized it. It makes sense if you think about it, why it was so hard for me to consider letting employees go as an option ever, because I had internalized that as a metric of success. So how could I let that go? I tried so many other things that I didn't necessarily value. I tried restructuring to have those monthly retainer contracts. I was never interested in those kinds of projects, but I knew that that would help us fund payroll. And so I tried it. I tried restructuring how much of a deposit our clients had to pay. I was asking our clients to change how they paid us and how they paid for projects to fund this payroll that I thought was so important. I never questioned it until finally, 2 years after that hardship started, I sat down with my business mentor and began to question, what are the real possibilities here? It wasn't until then that I thought about this idea of contractor teams. And like I mentioned in the beginning, it's been absolutely something that's made my business be able to stay successful. We're so much more nimble than we were. We're more specialized. it means that when there are unexpected things like a global pandemic, we're able to make changes and shift and adjust. It's one of the reasons that we're almost about to celebrate 10 years in business, something that very few people are able to get to or to do. And so I'm really thankful. I'm thankful for that opportunity. But more than that, I'm really thankful for that lesson that I learned about guarding your measuring stick. I think very carefully now about what success looks like for me, about what I want the business to be able to do and what I want to be able to do as a leader and an entrepreneur. And I'm very careful not to internalize other people's vision of success. What they see as a successful business owner might not be what I'm going to do as a business owner. It's helped me so much. We talk a lot about imposter syndrome these days and how in certain circles we can feel like we don't deserve to be there, or that someone's going to discover that we don't know enough to be there. And personally, I think a lot of that is internalizing what other people think you should look like or be like or have achieved in that moment. But if you know for yourself what that looks like, if you know for yourself what success looks like, and you know for yourself what you're working on and what you're working toward, I think it's harder for other people's visions of success to affect you in that way. I think it's easier to sit in those rooms and know that you deserve to be there because you know where you are on your success journey. I also think it makes it a little bit easier to admit when you don't know something or when you're not an expert in something, because maybe that's not high on your measuring stick. Maybe that's not something that you're pursuing. And it's easier to say, hey, you know what? I haven't learned much about that. That's not something that my business is doing right now, but that's interesting. Tell me what you think about it. And it's so much more freeing to be able to do that and hold true to the things that are important to you, but maybe deflect or even just acknowledge, but, say, hey, look, I notice you, and then let that thing pass if it's not for you. So if you're taking this lesson with you today, I hope that you're able to do it without going through the painful experience that I went through to learn this lesson. And I hope that you'll consider sitting down sometime today or this week and really listing out the things that you envision when you envision success. And when I say list it out, I mean bullet point it up, like just brain dump, write this giant list, and then take time to evaluate it and ask yourself, are these things really the things that are important to me? And maybe put that somewhere where you can see it pretty regularly. And then if it's social media or networking events or whatever it is that maybe knocks you down a little bit and makes you question yourself and whether you should be there, return to that list and remind yourself that those are the things that you're working on, and other people can have their lists, but this one is yours. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you for this opportunity to tell this story. I always appreciate a chance to connect with others and to share a little bit about what I've learned on this journey. If there's anything I can be doing to amplify you and your work, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Wow, Sarah, inspiring insights for all the leaders out there. Thanks for just taking a minute to be vulnerable, because as leaders, we do take on more risks. We do that naturally. And in doing so, we open the doors to tremendous opportunities, but also to moments of perceived failures. And you took those perceived failures and turned them into an opportunity for personal growth and professional growth, which is very inspiring. Guys, if you'd like to learn more about Sarah, about her previous speaking roles, or just absorb some of her inspirational content, please visit www.sarahglova.com. And lots of content coming to the site soon, Sarah. I am very excited to stay in touch and to just be a witness to your growth as you grow your business and help others grow theirs as well.